the campaign setting I did, Orc and Bone, which is for OSR games, is kind of a prototype in some ways of a concept of just playing a little bit with the formula for OSR. I mean, in terms of like how the rules operate, how the character classes operate, experience levels, and how races are designed. Sure, all that's fine. People are used to it, and all that good stuff. My thing is, I'd never have liked halflings. Of all the things to have jammed into a generic standard model fantasy game, uh, the inclusion of halflings is way too much of an obvious nod to Tolkien's hobbits. And the hobbits were extremely unique to Tolkien's Middle Earth setting, and not really something you typically would see common throughout all of fantasy fiction and or fantasy mythology for that matter. Stories of elves, way predate Tolkien. Stories of magical dwarves in the mines and the hills, those way predate Tolkien. So their inclusion in D&D, makes a little bit more sense because they are just kind of like just the part of the background tapestry of mythical creatures. Halflings, like I say, that's real specifically, like a direct handoff. I don't know what's the term I'm looking for. It's a direct nod to Tolkien's hobbits, and so I find it like both a little lazy and also, obviously they've had issues from the very get-go about even being allowed to call them hobbits, hence the fact that they used the term halflings in all the books because they didn't want to get sued. So not only are they a Hobbit ripoff, but they can't even call themselves hobbits, which to me is just a sign that, yeah, they are too specific to Tolkien's work and not a product of generic fantasy fiction, unlike elves and dwarves. And of course, there's that recent controversy, that kind of tried to rear its head over Peter Dinklage saying that, he's tired of fantasy dwarves as being a thing. And, as much as that is kind of like, okay, yeah, we get it, Pete, nice, pat on the head, good job, buddy, for pointing out something that's, like, been a product of, like, human fantasy, mythological storytelling traditions for centuries. But okay, yes, it's a problem. It's making you feel bad. Um, I there are other languages in the world that also have dwarves in mythology and use other terms for dwarves. So that is like one, easy way around that where you don't have to do anything to actually change them or remove them from the setting or any of that kind of stuff. It's just, maybe they do have a little bit of point of, the whole like, why is this one fantasy race named after people who suffer from like a genetic malformation, kind of a thing. Yeah, maybe that's a little weird. It's not like halflings are called midgets or, kind of a thing. So, like, I, I could argue for changing the name dwarves or just like with the halflings, just leave them the fuck out. Like human beings do get born occasionally being really small. So, if someone wants to play a dwarf, like it'd be like, what if Tyrion Lannister actually was, like a Tolkien dwarf and not just someone who suffered from dwarfism? Radically different character and all that kind of stuff. So, I guess, if we just cut out halflings and dwarves, then that just leaves us with humans and elves out of the core basic four D&D OSR races. I would then focus goblins as a playable thing. It also kind of helps replace the halfling as having the small, dexterous kind of character. And then you get kind of like a trinity of relation between humans, elves, goblins, humans. And from that, you can derive some of the other types of playable races. Humans and elves give you your classic half-elf. I would actually think it'd be funny to just go ahead and call those halflings, even though, because, like, half-elf, like, well, how come they're not also called half-human? That's very perspective-driven labeling, shall we say. So maybe just call that being the halfling, and it's kind of more like a changeling thing, where you're a little bit of a mixture of both worlds. Elf and goblin, their children would be hobgoblins. And goblins and humans, their children, is where you get orcs. Orcs being still derived from goblins. That's another thing that's kind of like overlooked about the Tolkien verse that didn't ramp over to D&D for some reason, is that orcs and goblins are like the same creature, and they're the same creatures as elves, and you know, all that. So anyway, though, like I think you get like an interesting little wheel going on there. I don't know. I just woke up. I'm trying to put out content for you thirsty bastards. So you figure it out. Stay waspinated.